Welcome. So we're exploring the second crisis of Isaiah's ministry, which is the confrontation between King Hezekiah of Judah and King Sennacherib of Assyria. And we actually have three different sources of this event. We have the biblical account, we have an Assyrian account, and this video is going to be dedicated to our final source, which is from Herodotus, who gives us an Egyptian perspective of this event. Now, both the biblical account and the Assyrian account told us that Egypt and Ethiopia, which is referred to as the Kushite Empire, came to the aid of Judah. So it makes sense that we have an Egyptian perspective of this event. Now, the biblical account told us that the pharaoh who was involved in coming to the aid of Judah was Taharka, and we have many statues and Egyptian sources about this pharaoh. Now, Herodotus does not mention Taharka, rather he mentions a pharaoh called Sethos, and we simply have no reference to Sethos in Egyptian records, which is very peculiar. One author notes, quote, "In the work of Herodotus, by contrast, Sennacherib's opponent is not the historical figure Taharka, but the enigmatic priest pharaoh Sethos," end quote. Now, many people have put forth theories to reconcile Herodotus and the Bible. Some say that perhaps Sethos is another name for Taharka. Others point to the fact that Sethos sounds very similar to the person who preceded Taharka, a man by the name of Shebiktu. But at the end of the day, we really have no idea who Sethos is. But for the remainder of this video, let's just use the image of Shebiktu. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't affect what Herodotus has written. And with that, let's now begin to read what he has written. Quote, "When Sennacherib, king of the Arabians and Assyrians, marched his vast army into Egypt, the warriors, one and all, refused to come to Pharaoh Sethos's aid. On this, the monarch, greatly distressed, entered into the inner sanctuary, and before the image of the god bewailed the fate which impended over him. As he wept, he fell asleep, and dreamed that the god came and stood at his side, bidding him to be of good cheer, and go boldly forth to meet the Arabian host, which would do him no harm, as he himself would send those who should help him. Sethos, then relying on the dream, collected such of the Egyptians as were willing to follow him, who were none of them warriors, but traders, artisans, and market people, and with these marched to Pelusium, which commands the entrance into Egypt, and there pitched his camp. As the two armies lay here opposite one another, there came in the night a multitude of field mice, which devoured all the quivers and bowstrings of the enemy, and ate the thongs by which they managed their shields. Next morning they commenced their fight, and great multitudes fell, as they had no arms with which to defend themselves. There stands to this day in the temple of Vulcan a statue of Sethos, with a mouse in his hand and an inscription to this effect: 'Look on me and learn to reverence the gods,'" end quote. So, to summarize what we've just read, according to Herodotus, who gives us the Egyptian perspective, the way in which the Assyrians were defeated was by a multitude of field mice coming and devouring the weaponry of the Assyrians. Now, it goes without saying that this is a very different account to that which is found within the Bible. But hopefully you realize that there is some connection between them. Both the Jewish and Egyptian perspective both appeal to a miracle to explain why the Assyrians retreated. And the fact that we have two independent sources that attest to a seemingly miraculous destruction of Assyria leads many people to believe that there must be some truth behind these stories. The most common theory put forth is that perhaps a plague swept through the Assyrian camp and so devastated them that they were unable to fight. You'll even find this theory put forth in non-scholarly Christian books, which argue that perhaps a plague is a more likely explanation than an angel killing the Assyrians. For example, in the book entitled The Bible in its Ancient Context, we read the following, quote, "The Bible attributes this setback to the angel of the Lord, Herodotus to thousands of field mice." While acknowledging the ultimate agent of this reversal is God, it is tempting to think of some sort of plague befalling Sennacherib's troops as its immediate cause. Although it is based on only circumstantial evidence, such an event would also help to fill in the apparent gaps in Sennacherib's own account, wherein his failure to take Jerusalem and depose Hezekiah is inconsistent with his treatment of other rebels." End quote. So here the author of this book also notes that this plague explanation would also explain why in Sennacherib's account of this event, the Assyrians, for an unmentioned reason, simply decide not to attack Jerusalem but return home to Nineveh. Thus, the plague hypothesis helps us to understand what Sennacherib has written on his prism. On this topic, the historian Anti-Lato writes the following, quote, "If we assume that the biblical account, together with Herodotus, provides an account about the bubonic plague or some other disease which forced the Assyrian army to retreat from its campaign in Judah, it is not difficult to solve the problems which Sennacherib's own accounts present." End quote. So there you go. Here are 3 independent accounts of the same event, which do complement each other quite nicely. They by no means are perfectly aligned, but there are elements of each of their stories which do cohere nicely with the others. And with that, we have come to our conclusion of studying these 3 accounts. I hope that this series of videos has been helpful to you. And if they have, please consider hitting the like button, leaving some comments in the comment section below, and also subscribe to this channel. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.